the Automated Podcast.
So happy New Year and the start of a new decade, everybody. This is Mark Verbankov with Augmented, the podcast exploring the future impact of technology on jobs. Really hope that all of you were able to get some rest and enough time with family or friends over the holidays. My time back in Canada was very relaxing, but I'm also really happy to be back here working on these episodes to really jumpstart a new decade. So I will actually try to have a holiday episode come out this week or next week. There were unfortunately quite some audio quality problems during the recording, so I'm still trying to make some edits so that the information can be presented without too many problems. I actually interviewed some family friends who are each nearing around 100 years in age, and what I tried to get was try to understand what it was like for them to experience technological change over the last 100 years, which I really think can be quite interesting, as I find that we ourselves are moving through a period that will even have more technological change than the last 100 years if this exponential nature of technological growth is holding to be true. So, as I said, I'll try to have that interview out soon. But today we'll briefly look at the idea of capitalism of things. However, during the course of the podcast break, there has been a number of recent developments in the world of technology and automation. So I wanted to spend this episode mostly talking about these, as I think it makes the ideas presented in the episodes so far a little bit more tangible. So first off, I think we can look at something that's really significantly strange to kick off this new year or this new decade. The first ever living robot was created. Now, we've looked at industrial as well as service robots before, but what exactly is a living robot, or xenobot as it's been called? So these are tiny sub-millimeter sized blobs, for lack of a better word, containing between 500 or 1,000 cells that can so far move across a petri dish and even carry some very small payloads. So they were designed by algorithms and constructed by humans using the stem cells from an African frog. So the stem cells are manipulated into skin and heart muscle cells, but for a more complex explanation of how this was done, I've linked an article in the show notes. So the relevant part to know is that the generated skin cells act as a sort of mesh that holds everything together, while the contractions of the heart cell muscles propel these xenobots. So these living robots actually moved around independently for up to a week, and they were powered by their own energy stores in the forms of lipids and proteins. So the researchers at the University of Vermont, where they were made, claim that these are actually novel living machines, and that they're neither a traditional robot nor a known species of animal. It's actually a new class of artifact, a living programmable organism. And apart from the pretty wild reality of this new technology, not to mention the potential ethical issues involved, I think the possibilities for using the custom living machines will be what interests most of us down the line. So some examples have already been proposed, and these are delivering medicine to specific areas in need, or even cleaning up microplastics for our oceans, which is a massive problem. But as it is still really early, we will have to wait and see. So secondly, for those of us living in the EU, it was recently leaked that the European Commission is considering measures to impose a temporary ban on facial recognition technologies used by both public and private actors. This is according to a draft white paper on artificial intelligence. So facial recognition is, of course, the technology that's becoming widespread in China, enabling both the convenient cashierless stores as well as the problematic policed, or even, as some argue, controlled population. So the complete white paper, however, will come out in late February, and it will also deal with artificial intelligence within Europe on a more general level. So then, near the end of 2019, in Dubai, a massive 640 square meter building was unveiled where the concrete walls were built using a giant 3D printer. It's actually the largest 3D printed building ever, and it's actually going to be making it into the Guinness World Record. But more relevantly, the building only required half the construction workers to complete it and generated 60% less waste compared to traditional construction techniques. It also cut the cost of construction by more than 50%. So the shape of the building is, of course, unique and offers an opportunity to imagine what different kind of structures can be built using the technology. I'll have a link of the building in the show notes for those interested in seeing it, as well as the 3D printer that was used to actually build it. Also, for those listening on Spotify, iTunes, or elsewhere, the show notes can be found on the website. So unfortunately, only a short blurb can be added to each episode on these platforms, but the website has the links and relevant sources for each episode, as some of you were asking me about where the show notes can actually be found. But moving on, most notably, of course, during this holiday break was, of course, CES 2020, or the Consumer Electronics Show that is held yearly in Las Vegas, where a number of new technologies are typically showcased for the first time. So I wanted to talk about a few of them that are relevant to the previous episodes of this podcast. So firstly are Samsung's prototype augmented reality glasses and workout exoskeleton. So as I personally purchased a small VR headset over the holidays and amazed my family and a few friends with it during this time, I was surprised to see that these new glasses are already significantly smaller and lighter than the bulky VR headsets out today. And if you haven't used a pair yet, I highly recommend it, as the technology has really moved forward and the experience is incredibly immersive. Of course, I do have the episode on VR and AR if you're curious about how these technologies will impact jobs. But the interesting part of this news is that the technology is definitely shifting towards smaller and more comfortable products. It's very probable that today's headsets will be seen like the large, block-like cell phones of the 1970s. And the same can be said for exoskeletons, which Samsung also unveiled and proposed to be used with workout games to correct a user's posture and track certain body metrics, of course in combination with those AR glasses. So this is compared to the large, bulky, powered versions that I talked about supporting employees in industry, as well as healthcare in the previous episode on robots. So another new technology presented at CES was something called Bot Chef. So though I've already mentioned robotic arms that are able to undertake cooking tasks, this pair of robotic arms has a few new tricks. Firstly, it is voice activated and starts work based on a single command like Bot Chef, make a salad. Secondly, the arms can function independently, such as one dicing ingredients for a salad while the other prepares, for instance, a pot of coffee. And thirdly, it has collaborative aspects built directly into it, such that while it was holding a knife, the human assistant walked towards it, and the sensors in place alerted the arm to slow down as the assistant approached, engaging its safety measures, and even releasing a buzzing sound to alert the assistant of the knife and, of course, the safety risk. So though this robot is currently dependent on a human co-chef, one can imagine that professional chefs, as well as anyone cooking at home, could be impacted should this technology become much more affordable for the average consumer. However, one, if not the largest hit of CES, was from a startup called Nyan. So the company showcased artificial humans, and this is similar to the ideas presented in the last episode before the holiday break, with digital humans and holograms replacing people in entertainment. However, Nyan's artificial humans are simply digital avatars that look and act like real humans, but displayed on a screen. So the excitement was generated due to the fact that they appeared on a wall as many different things such as yoga instructors, bankers, pop stars, news anchors, and even fashion models. The idea is that a more human look is being added to the growing use of digital AI assistants. The plan is that someday a Nyan artificial human might help you check into a hotel or become the face of a virtual driver in your future self-driving car. So though the hype surrounding this technology was dampened by the fact that the lifelike models were simply human actors and just a portrayal of what the company hopes to accomplish, The future digital humans will be able to generate countless facial animations as well as speak multiple languages. This appears to be kind of a more tangible human layer that can be added to the growing AI systems like digital assistants, enabling an easier uptake of AI technologies in the future. But most interesting of all, I think, was when Toyota revealed plans to build a prototype city of the future on a 175-acre site at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. This is called the Woven City, and it will be a fully connected ecosystem powered by hydrogen fuel cells, and is also planned to be fully sustainable, with buildings made mostly of wood to minimize the carbon footprint. So it's claimed that residents will be equipped with the latest in human support technologies, such as in-home robotics, to assist with daily living. The homes themselves will use sensor-based AI to check occupants' health, take care of basic needs, and supposedly enhance the daily life of everybody. This is also coupled with the fully autonomous transportation system that will be embedded in the city. However, it won't be ready for some time. So the groundbreaking will only start in 2021, but I think it will be a really interesting project to follow as it links to many of the things I've talked about in the podcast. So I'm quite curious how the day-to-day life of its residents will be different, for better or for worse. Also curious to hear what you think about this. If you want, you can let me know on Twitter. So linked to this automated and connected future city, we can look at the topic of this week's episode, the capitalism of things. Though, like many of the technologies showcased at CES, the implementation is only in its initial phase and may even never be fully realized. However, it is one that is very much connected to this shift on the automation of human tasks. So I think it's still very interesting and relevant to talk about. So the capitalism of things was actually hinted at in a few episodes, especially the one on the Internet of Things, which is actually where the term is derived from. So if you remember, the Internet of Things is where sensors enable various objects to become connected to the internet, share and receive data, and give us a more precise understanding about the physical characteristics of whatever it is that's being connected. I use the example of agriculture, where sensors in the ground can tell a modern farmer the moisture level of the soil, indicating whether a crop needs to be watered or not. So to understand possibly where the capitalism of things will come from, let's look at three successive layers. So the first can be seen through the emergence of new networking technologies, which has created something called task-based work. You can think of platforms like Fiverr or Upwork, where you can hire freelancers to take on specific tasks, like develop a logo, translate an article, or even edit a video. This has enabled large projects to be broken down and distributed across multiple individuals. Artificial intelligence, however, has pushed this further by facilitating those best suited to complete those actions to be paired with those needing the service without an intermediary to make that connection. So someone, for example, needing a logo designed can be guided to the designer that suits the price, time, and quality needs through these online platforms. You can also think of Uber connecting a driver with a passenger without the need to call a central agency and arrange a pickup. So second, when more autonomous systems are in place, humans are removed from the production side of the equation. For example, looking at Uber again, the passenger will be the only human in the interaction once Uber adopts autonomous vehicles, which the company, of course, has been looking into heavily over the last couple of years. But when this happens, both the driver as well as the matchmaker will be autonomous systems, and only the consumer, the passenger in this case, will be human. So the third layer is where the capitalism of things is finally introduced. Here, smart objects and systems exchange value and trade services autonomously. So if we go back to the agricultural example, think of the sensors around crops detecting ripeness. They can relay that data to autonomous harvesters, like the ones being tested in California right now, and the packaged food can be shipped by autonomous vehicle to stores. So the part I think that is interesting here is that many stores now are actually using sensors to determine when levels of products are low or empty. And that data is transmitted to have the stocks replenished without the use of employees scanning barcodes in aisles. So in this example, the store, transportation system, and farm are communicating and exchanging value and goods autonomously. So this same principle is being tested in smart homes and will certainly be a key aspect of Toyota's future city. So smart kitchens and cabinets could interact directly with, for instance, Amazon or other goods providers and request a stock up of household products from toilet paper to lettuce to shampoo without any human requesting that. So agriculture and homes are but two examples. I think that the idea of the capitalism of things is that these smart, self-communicating systems could interact in many industries and perhaps even account for a greater value of economic transactions than those done by individuals. If the systems in place work as designed, of course. This is, of course, quite speculative and is not going to be implemented tomorrow. But the technologies required to make this happen are in their early stages. The privacy, security, and regulatory concerns are far from dealt with, but nevertheless, I think it's a really interesting idea that has hints of taking shape today. So that's it for the first episode of 2020. As I mentioned in the last episode of 2019, the topics will now focus away from the specific technologies and more towards the overall impact of automation. So next week, we will look at the jobs that have disappeared and the new jobs that are going to be coming out. So thanks for listening, and as always, like or leave a review on whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on.
The Automated Podcast.